UTL, committed to trust.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Bibidola Agbileshi. I would like to welcome you to this UTL webinar titled Estate Planning Basics, Securing Your Future Through Asset Acquisition and Protection. I would like to introduce my learned colleague, Mr. Adeseewo Agunbiade, who would run us through this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Good afternoon. We are going to be talking about estate planning basics. So basically what we are doing is we are just talking about the 101 of estate planning, the basic things that we need to know about estate planning. If you've been following this concept online and been monitoring trends, you see that a lot of people are talking about estate planning and you are wondering what's this thing all about. So what I'm just going to be doing is to be giving the basics of estate planning and how you are going to be able to secure your future through asset acquisition and protection. So the first thing is that what is estate planning? And typically when we hear that word estate, we just start thinking of estates in terms of a block of flats and in these upper suburbs of Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt, but that's not what estate planning means. So estate in this concept means assets, properties, all sorts of properties. And estate planning means all the strategies to put in place for the purpose of acquiring property, for the purpose of managing those properties, and for the purpose of distributing those properties. So as long as you are alive, most of the times, all of us, we are in one stage or the other of estate planning. It's either we are acquiring properties, houses, cars, whatever properties that we are acquiring, or we are managing some of our properties. If you are living in your house, renovating your house, putting it in shape, that's also part of estate planning. And then distribution is another area that we're going to talk about very shortly. So estate planning means the process of acquiring, the process of managing or preserving, and the process of distribution of assets. And what constitutes an estate? What are the assets that a person can make a plan over? So is real estate, that's landed property, that's common knowledge. Automobiles, vehicles, common knowledge. Jewelry, especially for those of us that have very expensive jewelries. Also monies in bank accounts, they're also part of assets that you can put in an estate, create an estate plan over. We also have libraries, books in libraries, especially books that have a personal appeal to us. For example, if you are a Christian or a Muslim and you have a Bible, a Quran that has been passed down 3 generations from grandfather to son and then to the 3rd generation, it's also something that is a valuable asset that you might want to create an estate plan over. Then you have the RSCs, with the Pension Fund Administration. For those who are working class, the Pension Reform Act 2014 requires every employee to create a pension fund for employers, and the way it works is that it's 18% of the person's salary. So 10% is going to be deducted from the employer, 8% is going to be deducted from the employee. It's going to be paid into the hands of the pension fund administrator, and they are supposed to recoup same when you retire. So it's a property. The fact that you're not accessing it today doesn't mean it's not a property. It's an asset that can create an estate plan over. The intellectual properties, especially paintings that are expensive. So the basic gist is that any property that you have that is worth any value, if I want to consider creating an estate plan over it, it doesn't have to be restricted to cars and houses. And I'll give us an example. There's this sculpture that I got from my mother, and in my own site, it wasn't so attractive. I just took it because I heard it belongs to my great grandmother, and I just felt that okay, let me just hold on to it. I went for a meeting in Ibadan once, and I saw a similar replica of that same sculpture in all these museums in Ibadan. And by the time I inquired from them how much it would cost to buy that particular work of art, they told me it was ranging from about 380,000 naira. And I had this replica in my house. So when I heard that, it made me to appreciate that work of art more. Right now, I've polished it, I've kept it somewhere, and it's my property because I now know that it has value. So when we are talking about estates, it's not limited to cars and houses. Even some of those old plates that our grandmothers used to hand over to us, some of those breakable plates, they are very expensive and they are valuable assets. So estate is anything that is a property, anything that is an asset of value. So that's basically what estate is. And then what are the benefits of planning estate? The first thing is identification of assets. And I would like to speak to this. So typically when we ask people to identify the assets that they have, like I said, most people will mention money in their bank account. Most of us will mention our cars. Most of us will mention landed properties, but we'll forget money in bank accounts. If you remember that, we'll forget our pension. If you remember that, we'll forget the money that we've put into one cooperative or the other. If we forget that, if we remember that, we'll forget an artwork, like I said, or an heirloom that has been transferred through like 3 or 4 generations. For those of us that have social media with large followings, it's also an asset. So basically, what an estate plan does for you is it helps you to gather all your assets together, because the first thing you are going to do is to put all your assets on a list. You have to list out all your assets, where they are located, where they are situated, and it's very helpful. I'll give you an example. We had a particular client that passed away, and as at the time he passed away, we didn't know the extent of the amount of bank accounts he had. Back then, we didn't have BVN. BVN is a recent concept that links all the accounts, but there was no BVN, so you couldn't link all the accounts the person had. So we wrote to all the banks and we told them that if this particular client had any money in their bank, they should let us know. Some people wrote to us, some didn't respond. When we went to his office to gather his assets, to pick his personal belongings, we saw a checkbook that belonged to one of the banks that we had written to that didn't respond to us. So when we saw that checkbook, we detached a leaflet, we attached it to a letter, we sent it to the bank, and we copied CBN. By the time the bank responded to us, we realized that there was almost 30 million inside that bank account. That's money that will have been unaccounted for simply because it's not identified. I remember we were talking to the MD of one of the banks in Nigeria, and he was telling us the amount of money, unclaimed money, that the bank gathers every year was almost by 80 million. That's the amount of people in Nigeria that pass away without anybody knowing that they have a bank account somewhere, without any family member coming to inquire of that bank account. So the first thing that estate planning does, that it helps us to identify all the assets of a person so that it cannot be lost, it cannot be unclaimed. Nobody's going to sit down on that asset in the event that anything happens to that person. We know where all that person's assets are disposed. The second thing, the second benefit of estate planning is that it prevents inheritance and conversion by unintended persons. When the person doesn't put a proper estate plan in place, what typically happens is that the people who did not intend to take over his property might end up taking over that property if anything happens to him. Because in this part of the world, we are a very cultural society, and some of those customs, they have legal effect under our law. So when the person doesn't put in place the proper estate plan, some of those customs will kick in. For example, there are some places in Nigeria, especially in the Delta, that it's primogeniture. What that means is that if a person passes away, the majority of the property, sometimes 50%, sometimes more than that, goes to the firstborn son. It doesn't matter if during the particular person's life, he and the firstborn son were not on talking terms. There are some parts of the country that the male children are favored over the female children. So the point is that if a person doesn't put in place a proper estate plan, some of those customs kick in. Sometimes it kicks in favor of an uncle. Sometimes it kicks in favor of a distant male relative. So what typically happens is that a person that is unintended, that the testator, that is the owner of the assets, wasn't close to in his lifetime, might end up getting those properties. Another benefit is the protection of loved ones, especially minors and aged parents. And I can't stress this enough. We had a particular situation in which a particular man passed on. While he was alive, he was very wealthy. He was so wealthy that he told his wife not to work because he had enough to take care of his wife and his children. And he passed on without putting an estate plan in place. And because of that, there was money in the bank account. But the woman, his wife, could not access it. At a particular point in time, she had to go and take up a job as a security in a bank. The children were removed from private school. They started attending public school. His parents had nobody to take care of them. And so, without a proper estate plan in place, loved ones, minors especially, aged parents, they are at risk because their source of livelihood will depreciate. And not because there is no money, not because there's no assets, but because there was no plan that was put in place. Another benefit that it discourages conflict among loved ones. When you put an estate plan in place, people cannot be fighting over property because they know that this is what this person should take, this is what that person should take. And what this thing helps each and every one of us to do is to leave a legacy of peace, which is the greatest legacy any of us can leave for our family. A legacy of peace, that when you are no more, in the event that anything happens to you, there is peace in the family. People are not going to be fighting. The bitterness, the strife, you removed it. Another one is that it avoids inequitable distribution of assets. Like I said, when there's no estate plan in place, sometimes you might have a particular sibling or relative who is more domineering than others. And because of that, he might be able to take over more properties than other people. They might be suffering. That person might not care, because we had a situation of a client that his wife was very timid. He didn't put an estate plan in place. And by the time he passed on, the gratuity they were supposed to give him in the office, but by the time they gave it to the wife, the siblings came, they took over the gratuity from her. They shouted, the woman is a bit timid and everything. A proper estate plan prevents things like this from happening. And most especially, an estate plan gives access to institutionalized assets. This is perhaps one of the most vital benefits of estate planning. Most of us as Nigerians, we don't know that if anything happens to us today, our loved ones cannot access our bank accounts. While we are alive, if anything happens, if we need money, we can give them our ATM card to go and withdraw. But if anything happens to us today, they cannot access those money in the bank account. The bank is not going to release it to them. And there are no regulatory requirements for them not to release it unless estate plan documents are found, which I'll talk about very, very briefly. It's the same thing with pension. Without those documents, our loved ones will not be able to access those funds. So, and that's why I said that it's not as if there is no fund on ground. There are funds on ground. There are assets on ground. But without that estate plan, our loved ones will not be able to access them. And so one of the vital benefits of estate plan is that it gives access to all these assets. So how does a person create an estate plan? What are the documents? What are the instruments? What are the various means by which a person can create an estate plan? The first is a will. And all of us know what a will is. Unfortunately, in this part of the world, we don't like to talk about wills. And the reason why we don't like to talk about wills is that we believe that if we put a will in place, it's a death wish. And here's where I say that making a will is not a death wish. It's an informed decision. It's an highly educated decision. It shows that the person is exposed. It shows that the person has a high level education. It shows that the person cares about his family. It shows that the person is trying to secure the future of his loved one. It shows that the person is ready to look beyond himself to create a future for his loved one. That is what a will simply is. It's like taking an insurance on a vehicle. It's not because you want to have accident, but you're just putting in place a safe measure so that if anything happens to your vehicle, the funds to take care of that vehicle are in place. It's the same thing with a will. A young person, under law, once the person is above the age of 18, they can make a will. The law does not require the person to be 70 or 80 to make a will, because a will is something that everybody should do. If you make it as a young person, as you grow older, as you acquire more assets, as you get married, as you give birth, you can always keep updating. You can update your will as many times as you want. But it's important for everybody to put in place a will. It's not a death wish. It's not wishing evil on yourself. A will is a smart asset protection instrument. A will is a smart asset security document. Another option is a trust, and that's one that is not very common. Now, what's different between the trust and the will? The major difference is that, unlike a will that can only be activated when the maker is called the testator in legal parlance, when the maker passes away, a trust begins to run while the maker is still alive. So even the maker himself can be a beneficiary under a trust. Think about a trust like hiring a driver to drive a car. If I have a car and I hire a driver, it doesn't mean I can't drive the car. I can drive my car if I want to. But if anything happens to me, I'm tired, or I injure my foot, or I suffer any incapacitation of any sort, I can tell my driver to carry me to where I'm to my destination. So that's the same thing with the trust. The trust most likely kicks in case of incapacitation. Even when the person is alive, if he's incapacitated, that is, he suffers an injury or an accident that prevents him from being able to act. The person that is appointed as a trustee under that trust document will be able to have access to that property and to use that property in accordance with the instructions that that person has put in that trust document. So unlike a will, which can only be activated when the person passes away, a trust kicks in while the person is still alive. And what is our solution at UTL? We have an online solution, we have an offline solution. For the online solution, we have two options. We have the RSA simple wills or simple trust. We also have a provision for those of us that are Muslims that want to create an Islamic estate plan that is Sharia compliant. And then for the offline process, we have the comprehensive will and the comprehensive trust. So the basic difference between both is that for comprehensive will or comprehensive trust, we are talking about large assets, typically assets whose value are above 30 million. Or assets which are complex. For example, if someone has property in Lagos and in Ogun State and in Abuja and in Port Harcourt, or property outside jurisdiction, the simple will is not going to suffice. The person has to go for a comprehensive will. So for the simple will, what is the process? The process is to log on to www.power.ng. You can see this slide. Once you log on to that platform, is an online will and trust writing platform. You don't need to be going up and down looking for lawyers. The platform is secure, the platform is safe, is equipped with is encrypted, you don't have to worry about security, and it's user friendly. You simply click, you create and verify the account almost the way you create an email address. Then you choose documents from the templates that have been provided for you, whether you want to create a simple trust or a will, or you want to create an estate document that is Sharia compliant, that's an Islamic will. Once you do that, you fill in the details. Once you fill in the details, you have the opportunity to preview, because as you begin to fill in the details, the platform will begin to put together the estate plan for you, either in form of a will or a trust, dependent on what you selected. So once you fill in the details, then you print out. And when you print out, you sign, you get your witnesses to sign as well. You seal and you dispatch to us. One of the things that once you pay, one of the things that will be generated for you is a will bill. You're allowed to take that will bill to a courier service. That's DHL, which we are working closely with. They will collect the will from you or the trust from you at no pay. Once you present them with the will bill, you bring it to us, and then we will complete, taking to the parade registry and all other legal compliance issues. Then for the offline process, you can contact Willpower or UTL. You go to that same website and you see the contact addresses there. When you contact us, we hold sessions with you. You fill the required forms. Once you fill the required forms, you pay, we finalize, we seal, and then we dispatch. We also take care of all the legal compliance issues from our own end. So basically, these are the simple step process into estate planning. And I'd just like to run through it. The first is to know what estate planning is, the process of acquiring assets, the process of managing those assets, the process of distribution of those assets. The distributing assets is the place where the will and the trust kicks in. Then what assets are, say jewelry, automobiles, bank account, anything of value. That's what assets are. The third thing is the purpose of estate planning, helps you to identify your assets, prevents inheritance or conversion by an unintended person, protection of loved ones, gives you access to institutionalized assets. Then vehicles, you have a will, you have a trust, whichever you prefer. Both of them have strengths, both of them have weaknesses. For the will, the strengths are the fact that it's easy to put assets inside the will. It doesn't have to go through name change. You can put landed assets, you can put retirement savings accounts. You can put any asset, but for a trust, one of the complexities is that you might have to change the asset into the name of the trust. But what smart people do is people do both sometimes. For example, they do the will to cover landed assets and assets whose name they don't want to change, and they do the trust to cover basic liquid assets. But it depends on which you prefer, and you can look at which you prefer and just make your decision as case may be. And then, like I said, we have the online process for making wills. We have the offline process. For the online process, you can go to www.willpower.ng. It's user friendly. Once you click on it, you even be thanking me that you didn't know that this kind of technology exists. And for the offline process, yes, you can contact us and then we'll just move forward from there. So thank you.
All right, everyone, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Adeseewo. So we do hope the information passed across to you with regards to the wills and everything come in very handy. Please, if you we would appreciate if you could get back to us. If you are seeking, if you do have any questions regarding estate planning or anything, you could please put them on the question and answer box. We do not have any questions at this time, but we would give a minute or two for anyone if you still feel you need any additional information on estate planning. Okay, yes, we do have a question now from Sikiru Abbas. I would want to know if the subscription is one-off or the subscription is annually. Adeseewo, could you help with that? I want to know if subscription is one-off or subscription is annually.
So we have a question from Sikiru Abbas. Says, I want to know if the subscription is one-off or the subscription is annually. Okay, so in answering that, typically it's a one-off payment. Typically it's a one-off payment. Once you make that one-off payment, that is all that you are going to have to do. But the reason why I use the word typically is that you recall that when I was talking, I said that these documents can be updated from time to time. And the reasons for updates are simply the fact that a person's situation might change. The change might be that he has acquired new properties. The change might be that he has new beneficiaries. For example, he has given birth to more children or she has given birth to more children in the case that the will or the trust is being set up by a woman. So in that case, when you're going to make an update, you're also going to have to pay a fee for that update. But if you're not making that update, then it's a one-off payment.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. There was an additional question, but I think the answer given takes care of that. Thank you very much, Mr. Sikiru Abbas. Are there any other questions? Okay, Mr. Sikiru Abbas would also like to know what is the percentage for the update? What is the percentage for the update?
Okay, so the percentage is going to be determined on the person's specification, the particular estate plan that the person is looking at. So if it's a simple will, for example, a simple will that is being made on the will part platform, the original fee for that is 50,000. If the person is going to make an update on the will part platform and he use UTL as executors, now the percentage is going to be lower than that. Now, who is an executor? The way a will or a trust works is that when you are making these documents for a will, when it becomes activated, the person will have passed away. So there has to be someone who is going to implement the instructions that was contained in that will. That person who is called an executor. The law allows you to use individuals. The law allows you to also use corporate organizations like UTL. Now, the reason why we usually advise people to use corporate organizations is that unlike individuals, corporate organizations don't easily die. So for individuals, they can pass on. We've seen a situation where the person that was made the executor will pass on before the will maker or the maker of the trust himself, the settler of the trust. But when you use a corporation, the corporation doesn't easily die. Then a corporation is neutral, it's biased. They are not biased. Individuals might be biased towards one child because these are people that will typically know you. They will prefer one child over one other child, and they might, when it's time to implement, they might be trying to favor one child. So if you use UTL as executors, you don't have to pay the full amount when you are updating. You just pay typically a low amount of money. If what you are going for is a will that is Sharia compliant, that is a Muslim will, typically the first time you are creating that will on the online platform is going to be 65,000. It's going to be 75,000. Sorry, 75,000. If you are updating, again, if you use UTL as executor, it is reduced. But if UTL is not used as executor, each time that you want to update, you have to pay it afresh again. So basically that's it. But if UTL is used as executors, you don't have to pay the same amount for each update.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Any other questions, please? Okay. In the absence of any, I would like to thank Mr. Adeseewo. I'd like to thank everyone who has participated in this webinar. If you would still like to reach us at UTL, probably for will planning service, estate planning services, please feel free to reach us on any of our handles via social media, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. You could also send us an email. You could also visit our website, www.utltrustees.com. Thank you very much, everybody. Do have a lovely evening.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
UTL